For the first time since Adley Rutschman came to the big leagues, the Orioles have lost 5 games in a row as they drop another one to the Guardians on Tuesday. What went wrong? What went right? And what is next for the O's? That's coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Wednesday, June 26th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the 5th consecutive loss for the Orioles, falling 10-8 in a slugfest against the Guardians on Tuesday night. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including the offense waking back up, a huge game for Jordan Westberg, and a pretty abysmal start from Cole Irvin. Then we'll talk about a little more Orioles news and notes. Garrett Cooper signed to a minor league deal. Jackson Holliday back on the field. And if there's time at the end, I wanted to shout out some of the Orioles' best minor leaguers so far this year as we have hit the halfway point of the minor league season. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. So we start today with, unfortunately, another Orioles loss. Final score from Camden Yards on Tuesday night, the Cleveland Guardians 10 and the Orioles 8. That is game 2 of a 3-game set against the team that now has the best record in the American League. And the Orioles have now dropped 5 in a row, swept in Houston over the weekend, and have lost the first 2 back at home against the Guardians. It is their first 5-game losing streak since May 13th through the 18th of 2022. That was shortly before Adley Rutschman was called up that May to make his major league debut for the first time ever that Adley has lost 5 games in a row. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles 10-8 loss to Cleveland on Tuesday night. The first thing you need to know is the positive side from this one. The Orioles offense is no longer in a slump. We talked about how the biggest reason why they came in with a 4-game losing streak is that the O's had scored a combined 4 runs over their last 3 games. Well, they certainly hit the ball on Tuesday night. 8 runs on 16 hits for the Orioles offense against Guardians pitching. A lot of it came against starter Logan Allen, who they knocked out of there in the 4th inning. He only recorded 9 outs and gave up 6 runs in this game. The O's also worked 6 walks in this one. They were on base a whole lot. There was traffic on the base paths. They looked confident at the plate once again. Their home run streak was snapped on Monday night, the franchise record 22 consecutive games with a home run. Well, they certainly started a new streak on Tuesday. 4 homers for the O's. You had a Gunnar Henderson line drive homer in the first for his 25th of the season, second most in baseball. Then you had back-to-back homers in the 4th that knocked out Logan Allen. How about James McCann going over Baltimore? McCann had a 2-hit day, also an RBI single, had 3 RBIs on the day. Unfortunately, McCann, who was 2 for 4, is the first time since he joined the Orioles before the 2023 season that the Orioles have lost when James McCann recorded multiple hits. I believe the Orioles were 9-0 in James McCann multi-hit games before Tuesday night. That may have been the worst part of this loss. Then you had Colton Cowser just rocketing a homer over 430 feet, going back-to-back with McCann. And then finally, Anthony Santander with an opposite field shot in the 8th to make it 10-8, a solo homer into the flag court. That makes it 12 home runs in the month of June for Santander. It's already been the best month of his career, but that now ties an Orioles record for home runs in June. The last guy to hit 12, Chris Davis, in the 53 home run season back in 2013. He had 12 of them in the month of June. And I think the best thing overall for this offense, I mean, you had other great performances. Ryan Mountcastle had a 3-hit day. Gunnar had a couple of hits. I mentioned James McCann. Jorge Mateo had a triple in this game and luckily, hopefully avoided injury on a weird tag play in this one as well. I think the best part was You can no longer be really worried about the offense, and I never was because this team has so much talent and so much depth, but also they didn't really look tired. Like these last 3 losses, they've kind of looked tired. They've got nothing going at all at the plate. The offense just looks like this schedule in June had gotten to them. Well, when you put up 16 hits and 8 runs, you don't really look tired anymore. And that's the best part of this because, yes, it sucks to lose 5 games in a row, but I will say it is much worse to watch when you're losing because your offense is in a slump rather than just having some pitching issues because like, hey, our offense is just going to be able to hit us out of this. And as soon as our pitching figures it out, we can go on a run again. And that is how this Orioles team is kind of built. So at the very least, it was nice to see the offense break out. The second thing you need to know from Tuesday is you got to specifically shout out Jordan Westberg in this game, who surprisingly ended up with only 1 RBI of the 8 runs. But Westberg, the Guardians did not get him out. Westberg with 4 for 4 on Tuesday night, 3 singles, a double, and a walk with an RBI, 3 hard hit balls, now up to an 853 OPS on the season for Westberg. Just swung the bat really, really well. I mean, Westberg was like the only guy awake Saturday and Sunday for the Orioles. Remember, they scored 1 run in each of those 2 games against Houston. Both of those runs were Jordan Westberg solo homers. And then it was really weird. Monday night, Westberg, I think, had his worst game of the season on Monday. Looked completely lost in an 0 for 4 day at the plate, had some really bad strikeouts. That's how good he is. He can just lock back in and go 4 for 4. Second 4-hit game of Westberg's career, but his other one, he was 4 for 5 against the D-backs earlier this year. This is his first ever 4 for 4 performance. Really good looking day at the plate for the Orioles' second-year player. Third thing you need to know from the loss Tuesday, though, is that the Orioles did squander like the one final big chance to come back and take the lead late in this game. It was the 7th inning. The Orioles were facing the Guardians bullpen, which is the best in baseball, but a Guardians bullpen that has pitched a lot lately and had to cover a lot of innings Tuesday because Logan Allen, their starter, only gave them 3 innings, and the O's were starting to get to them in that 7th inning. They got a couple of knocks. Ryan O'Hearn walks as a pinch hitter, and they load the bases with nobody out, trailing 8-6 in the bottom of the 7th inning. They were facing Scott Barlow, who had struck out the side for the save the night before, and Heston Kjerstad comes up as a pinch hitter for Jorge Mateo, and unfortunately, he strikes out looking. And Kjerstad had a great game Monday night, returning to the big leagues. But the harsh reality is, like, he's still not going to be an everyday player. Now, it looks like he's going to play a little more than he did his first stint this year. But if you want to get yourself to at least as close as Kjerstad can get to everyday at-bats on this roster, it's unfortunate because you can't grade a guy for 1 at-bat, but you do have to come up somewhat in that scenario. I'm not saying you have to come up and hit a grand slam to give him the lead, but you got to poke a fly ball out there. Maybe put the ball in play, get yourself a sac fly, at least bring one of those runs home. You can't strike out looking in that spot. Now, it's not going to like bench him or anything, but when you're not going to get everyday opportunities, you got to make the most of the ones you get. And this was a big opportunity for Kjerstad. He did not come through. Then James McCann almost grounded into the greatest double play I've ever seen. Jose Ramirez made an amazing play on what looked like they had turned a 5-4-3 double play to get out of the inning, but the second baseman, his foot had come off the bag, so the run scores safe at second, and it's just an RBI ground out for McCann. And then Cowser hit a ball hard. Unfortunately, it hit off the mound, ends up being a ground out to shortstop, and the Orioles get 1 run, but leave a couple on and still trail 8-7. Now, you got to give credit to Cleveland's number 1 bullpen. I mean, arms 1 through 8 are elite out there. Like, that is the deepest bullpen I have seen in a long time with the arms they got coming out of that pen. And the O's got to them a little bit. They showed some cracks, that bullpen did. Even Emmanuel Clase in the 9th inning, like they got a Mullins double and Adley hit a ball hard. They looked okay in that 9th inning against Clase, who's been untouchable this year. But I think the one issue for the O's, and it showed up in that 7th inning, like, it's amazing to get 8 runs, but when you look a little deeper, they were 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position. That's how you have 16 hits and 6 walks and still only score 8 runs. Now, you'll take 8 runs any day, but in a game where you needed a little bit more, it's actually very surprising to go 1 for 11 and still score 8 runs. I guess that's what happens when you hit 4 homers, but they needed a couple more big hits and just didn't get them late in the game. I'm not going to blame the offense, though, at all in this game, because the fourth thing you need to know from this loss is that Cole Irvin went out there and basically threw batting practice. I mean, this was his worst start of the year. Now, he only got charged with 4 earned runs, despite the fact that 8 runs scored against him. His final line, 4 innings, 10 hits in 4 innings, 8 runs, 4 earned, 1 strikeout, no walks, and a homer on 71 pitches. The Guardians were just all over Cole Irvin in this game. 10 hard hit balls in 4 innings. They crushed him. Basically every hit was mashed. Jose Ramirez had the hardest hit ball of his career with a double that he hit off of Cole Irvin. And then Ramirez had a big 3-run homer later in the game in the 4th inning against Irvin. It was just the issue of the night was Cole Irvin couldn't get anybody out. And Irvin's been great this year, but the last couple of starts have been shaky. And this one was by far his worst. And the play in the 4th that kind of made things unravel, it was a weird play. You got a runner on first and 1 out. You hit a little squibber out in front of the plate. James McCann makes the right play, throwing to second. And the throw wasn't terrible. And Mateo didn't make a bad play trying to catch it. It was just a weird scenario where the ball hit Mateo's glove as the runner sliding into second also hit ball and glove. Mateo's hand got bent back. The ball popped out. The runners advanced. And then the inning kind of got away from the O's, and it ended up being a 5-run 4th for Cleveland. And those runs, a lot of those runs ended up being unearned because of that play. Like he should have been out of the inning. Just a weird sequence of events. Saw a lot of people blaming James McCann for that play. It was a solid throw. It was the right play to make. It was just weird timing, a kind of a weird slide. And the O's just didn't catch a break on that play. And that's then up to Cole Irvin to not let the inning unravel. He certainly let the inning unravel after that, and he was just throwing the ball down the middle. He didn't have good command, but it wasn't the kind of bad command where you walk a lot of guys. He didn't walk anyone. It was the bad command where he's throwing for the corners, which Cole Irvin needs to do because of his stuff. It's not overpowering. And instead it ended up down the middle of the plate. And the Guardians, who have been red hot recently, they just won their 7th game in a row, did not miss basically anything. You can't have it from Cole Irvin. And people somewhat with something to back it up and otherwise just wanting to be angry, really wanted to blame the offense over what's happened in the last, 3 or 4 games. It's just not the case. The Orioles offense has been great all year. They had a little bit of a blip, but they were great again on Tuesday night. What Irvin shows us is the issue right now, if you're going to bring up a full-fledged issue for a 5-game losing streak, is that the Orioles starting pitching is decimated by injury, and the guys still in there just have not been good. The Orioles have not had a quality start in this losing streak. You add to that the fact that they didn't have a quality start in any of the games against the Yankees in New York. That is 8 straight games without even a quality start. And the metrics for a quality start, it's not like crazy. You need 6 innings and 3 earned runs or less, and they haven't gotten that from any of their starting pitchers in this stretch, and that is an issue. And, you could argue Irvin's been the worst of them all. Honestly, I think I would say that Irvin's been the worst start in this stretch. Like that was not good at all. But I don't even pin this fully on Cole Irvin because when you watch him pitch, Cole Irvin is not going to dominate guys. He's not going to overpower guys. He's not going to strike out a lot of batters. The way he throws, and we saw it when he struggled last year in his first year with Baltimore, he kind of toes the line at all times between crafty lefty who makes you really annoyed as a hitter and guy throwing batting practice. And he had erred on the side of crafty lefty for the most of this year. He is a sliver away from slipping over to batting practice. And we saw it from both Irvin and Logan Allen, the Cleveland starters tonight, both soft tossing lefties who don't have overpowering stuff. They both crossed over into the mark of batting practice. I don't think Cole Irvin's going to be like this all year. I think we've seen enough from him this season that have been good that he can get back to that crafty lefty side and help the Orioles and throw some good innings. This issue is not about Cole Irvin. It's more about the Orioles rotation doesn't look great right now. The injuries are down. I'm really only trusting 2 of their 5 starters at this point. That's Grayson Rodriguez and Corbin Burns. And there's not a lot of help on the way. We know that Dean Kramer is going to need at least 1 more rehab start in Triple-A. Hopefully he returns soon. And then after that, you're looking at Chase McDermott, who hasn't proven himself as a rookie, and then the veteran Julio Teheran. Like those are your next 2 options in Triple-A until you go and get somebody before the trade deadline. That is what is worrying me right now. It's not that Cole Irvin can sometimes get hit around like this. We knew that. You knew that when you traded for Cole Irvin, but you hope the better is more often than the bad, and that's what it's been so far this year. The issue is that a pitcher like that is currently your number 3 starter. That is the issue for the O's at this moment. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 10-8 loss to the Guardians on Tuesday night that extended their losing streak to a season-high 5 games is that the bullpen did mostly hold down Cleveland after Cole Irvin came out of the game. I mean, how about Brian Baker? Let him bake once again. 6 up, 6 down for Baker. That was a huge 2 innings, replacing Irvin, getting through the 5th and 6th. Nick Vespi, nice 1-2-3 7th. Dylan Tate had a 1-2-3 9th to keep it 10-8. Unfortunately, there was one bad outing, and it was Yennier Cano, who gave up 2 runs in the top of the 8th inning, allowed Cleveland to extend the lead. It was kind of a weird spot. Cano had 5 days of rest. Probably the most he's had in the big leagues, I would think, is 5 days of rest, because the Orioles haven't needed to use him because they've been losing or getting blowout wins, and they just had to put him in there to get some work. It was a good spot. You're trying to keep it 8-7 in the 8th inning, and he just didn't have his best stuff. He got hit around, had a bad break where he tried to field a grounder he shouldn't have, and it turned out into an RBI single. And all of a sudden, it's 10-7, and Cleveland's got the cushion that they need. But overall, still a good performance from the bullpen the last couple of days, despite the losing continuing. And that's where we're at. The Orioles have now lost 5 in a row. Positive from the game, offense is back. I trust them to outscore an opponent and stop this losing streak. Negative of the game, starting to worry about the state of this starting rotation. Now, the Orioles, I think, are going to add to this rotation before the trade deadline. But somewhat surprisingly, on Monday, they actually added to their offensive depth. Now, it was a minor league deal for a player in Garrett Cooper who was an all-star just 2 years ago. But the question is, will he even get a chance with the Orioles at some point this year? We'll try to answer that question coming up after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That right there is the formula for winning championships, but it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they have you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Now, you know about LinkedIn, but it's got a lot to offer. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling can be tougher than ever. And that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals, and it shows you hidden allies. You can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. And it's fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform. So Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. And right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon to get started. So the Orioles dropped another game on Tuesday, but they did add a depth piece to their organization. As it was reported on Monday, the Orioles have signed veteran first baseman Garrett Cooper to a minor league deal. Now, who is Garrett Cooper? 33-year-old right-handed hitting first baseman, kind of slash outfielder, who has been in the big leagues with 5 different organizations. This will be his 6th, at least 6th big league team if he reaches with the Orioles, since 2017 when he came up with the Yankees, then was traded to the Marlins, played there for a while, was actually an all-star in 2022 with the Marlins. Kind of a weird all-star. He was a late replacement, didn't have a great second half of the year, so his season doesn't look amazing. But then he's bounced around since then, was with the Marlins, and then was traded to the Padres in 2023, then signed with the Cubs this year, then was traded to the Red Sox, and then was DFA'd by the Red Sox last week. And here is where we stand. Now, between the Red Sox and the Cubs. He had 116 plate appearances in the big leagues this year, and it wasn't the usual Garrett Cooper. His bat kind of fell off at the major league level this season. A 206 average, 267 on base, and a 299 slugging. That's good for just a 59 WRC plus. Remember, 100 is league average. So he's 41% below league average with the bat, 6% walk rate, 30% strikeout rate. Not great for Garrett Cooper. Now, he still hits the ball hard. He still has barreled the ball his entire career. And that's what he's kept doing this year, even if the results haven't been great. He was a little better last year, pretty much a full-time player between the Marlins and the Padres last year. Almost 500 plate appearances, had a 723 OPS, 96 WRC plus, hit 17 homers, just kind of a league average hitter throughout that full season last year. Now, he was a really, really good hitter in his time with the Marlins from 2019 to 2022. Hasn't been the same player since then, but the thing is, he's really a first baseman at this point now. He has made 76 career starts in the outfield, never played center field, but has played right and left. But it's been a while since he did that. He played 3 innings in left field earlier this year. That was the first time Cooper had played the outfield in the big league since 2021. So he has played the outfield before, but really at this point, he is just like an okay defensive first baseman. So the question is, okay, he only plays first. He's a hitter who hasn't hit that well this year, and he's 33. Why are the Orioles bringing him in? Well, it's the reason why the Orioles bring in any player on a minor league deal. It is depth. He is not guaranteed a roster spot. He is going to report immediately to Triple-A Norfolk. He may never even play for the Orioles this season, but he brings you depth. Now, you do have Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn, and Heston Kjerstad all already on this roster as kind of first base / DH options for the Orioles. And we know even Anthony Santander and James McCann, if you need him to, and Ramon Arias, if you need him to, can all play first base. But you really have no true first baseman or a lot of depth at all in the system when it comes to specifically first base. Like the Orioles are rotating like Kobe Mayo over there, and Kjerstad was over there a little bit when he was down, and you'll have Billy Cook play some first base down in Triple-A Norfolk. They haven't really had a first baseman there this year. They had Lewin Diaz there all of last year, but did not bring him back. So at the very least, Garrett Cooper gives you a guy who's not going to play every day in Triple-A Norfolk because, you're not going to have him take at bats away from the Kobe Mayos and the Kyle Stowers and the Connor Norbys and Jackson Hollidays of the world. But he is going to give you a chance to have a real first baseman down there and has some depth because if something happens to Mountcastle, something happens to O'Hearn, you have a veteran guy who's been in the big leagues for a while who you can call up if there's any kind of injury. And if you don't, he can get at bats down in AAA, maybe opts out at some point. Either way, it's just nice to have depth. You're not spending any money on this at all. It is a low risk, probably not high reward, but it's a low risk move that gives you depth. There's really no problem. And I say this all the time with every minor league signing, there is no downside to giving out a minor league deal. That works the same here for a former All-Star in Garrett Cooper, who, hey, he still hits the ball hard. Maybe the Orioles see something there that they can get out of him. And at the worst, maybe he's hitting so well in AAA that he becomes one of the September call-ups, and maybe he's like a nice pinch hitter and a nice guy who can mash some lefties and helps the Orioles at some point. That's probably the ceiling of his potential role with the O's, but it is a potential, unless, of course, there's a major injury, then he could play a little bit more. But if there's not, you never know. The Orioles brought in Jesus Aguilar late in the year 2 years ago. It's probably going to be better than that if they do have to call him up, but at the worst, he's depth, and depth is never, ever, ever a bad thing to have. But speaking of depth in AAA, I was going to get to some kind of minor league shout outs for the Orioles. We're going to get to them, but just the AAA guys, because there's one other AAA guy I want to talk about as well, and that is Jackson Holliday, who returned to the field on Tuesday. We'll talk about that, and also who have been the best of his teammates in Norfolk this year, coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Now, it is June, but here at Locked On Orioles, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It is year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over does not mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. That is the best part at Tax Network USA. They are going to help you out when you need it. And this stuff can be stressful, but they've got 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. So whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or you finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-559-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon and see the link in this episode description below. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Now, how you do it at Prize Picks? Well, you download the app first of all. And the second thing you do is just log on and look at the numbers that Prize Picks gives you. You just have to pick more or less on anywhere from 2 to 6 players. And you look at Major League Baseball and you say, okay, well, maybe I'm looking at Gunnar Henderson tonight, and it could be more or less 1.5 hits. Well, the way he's been swinging it, the way the Orioles looked and they were swinging it on Tuesday, maybe you just say more. It's right. You get a couple more right. You can collect your cash. You can win up to 100 times your money at Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today. And that's kind of all you need to do. The Prize Picks app is where you can put in all of your entries. So again, download the Prize Picks app today, where you can play the best version of daily fantasy sports. And if you go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code LOCKEDONMLB, you can also get a first deposit match up to $100. At Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So to finish off today's episode, wanted to start with a big piece of Orioles injury news from Tuesday, and that is Jackson Holliday was activated off of the Triple-A injured list on Tuesday. He had some elbow inflammation. He did not play the field on Tuesday night, but he did DH for the Orioles, and that is probably the biggest thing here. Went 1 for 2 with a double, a run scored, and 2 walks in his return to the lineup. Now, he was pinch hit for in the 10th inning of the game. But according to the Orioles and according to Jake Rill of MLB.com, that was the Orioles' plan. They said you're getting no more than 4 plate appearances no matter what. So that was pulled. It did not seem like it was any kind of further injury. Good to see. Obviously, we'll follow along and see when he gets back in the field as well with that elbow issue. And then as soon as he does that and feels comfortable, you start talking about, okay, when does he come back to the big leagues? But I did want to give some shout outs to some minor league players because this week marked the halfway point of the minor league season. And somewhat surprisingly, once the Orioles play Thursday's game, I believe the Orioles will be at the halfway point of this season. The minor league halfway point is a little bit crazy. The Orioles being at the halfway point as they now sit 49-30. By the way, shout out to the Mets, who the last time I checked were beating the Yankees to keep it at 2 games back. Let's do a live check. It's fantastic radio. They've let the Yankees back in it, but it's 9-7 in the 8th. So if they can hold on, the O's will still be 2 games back. But it's crazy that the O's are 2 games away from being halfway through, but the minor leagues are halfway through as well. So I want to do a series just kind of shouting out 2 hitters, 2 pitchers from all of the Orioles minor league affiliates that have really stood out so far in the first half of the season. The first guy will usually be a top prospect, you know. The second guy will be an under-the-radar guy you may not. So let's start with Norfolk pitchers. Their best prospect pitcher so far has been Chase McDermott, a guy who I think could be the next pitcher called up to help the Orioles. I think he's certainly going to be a bullpen piece this year. He might even need to be a starter at some point, but he's been a starter in Norfolk, 14 starts, 70 innings, 3.84 ERA, 33% strikeout rate, been great, 14% walk rate. He's got to get it down a little bit, but he's been really good this year. And my AAA pitcher honorable mention, how about left-hander Luis Gonzalez, who was in the Orioles organization for years. Then he left, pitched in other leagues. In the Mexican League, the Orioles re-signed him to a minor league deal this offseason. Fastball, slider, changeup guy, has a 3.30 ERA in 30 innings. And how about this? A 2.83 FIP, 39 strikeouts to only 3 walks in 30 innings for the lefty Luis Gonzalez. He is a veteran. He's been around the block. I honestly think Luis Gonzalez is going to get a chance in the Orioles bullpen at some point this year. He's been that good, so watch out for him. On the hitting side, as we know, Kobe Mayo returned last week. He's been that best prospect hitter this year. A 143 WRC plus on the season with 14 homers. Walks are good. Strikeouts aren't terrible. Hitting 297, slugging 604, 92.2 average exit. That leads the team. He's another guy who's knocking on the door of this Orioles lineup at some point soon. And then the honorable mention for a Triple-A hitter. How about Daniel Johnson, another guy who the Orioles brought in, a veteran. He's been in the bigs before, brought him in on a minor league deal this offseason. Not sure where a path to playing time is. Kind of a left-handed hitting outfielder. Yeah, another one that the Orioles have. How about Daniel Johnson hitting .293, a .544 slugging? His 13 homers has him on pace for a career-high homers. Never hit more than 19 in a season. He's got 13 halfway through, a 129 WRC plus for him. He was pretty fun to watch in spring training. He's been great in Triple-A. If the O's suffer another outfield injury, don't be surprised if maybe Daniel Johnson could get a shot at some point. He's got a lot of guys to leapfrog, but shout out to him for being pretty good in Triple-A this year. But that'll do it for today's episode. Despite 5 losses in a row, thank you so much for everyone who's still tuning in. The wins will come. Trust me, the wins will come. The Orioles are a great team. Hopefully it starts back here tonight when the O's will look to avoid back-to-back sweeps and try and end this losing streak. And they got a good guy on the mound to do it. Grayson Rodriguez taking the hill wasn't great in his last start, but I think he'll be the stopper and a good chance to score some runs as well. Carlos Carrasco, this is not old school Carlos Carrasco. This is a 5.40 ERA. Carlos Carrasco in 13 starts. The veteran right-hander is coming off his best start of the year, but still a guy the Orioles should pummel and avoid the sweep in tonight's game. And then the plan is that I will be back tomorrow to recap Game 3 between the Orioles and the Guardians and continue on shouting out some minor leaguers this year. But I will be traveling throughout the day on Wednesday, so I'll try to keep it updated on the Locked On Orioles Twitter account. If there's no episode tomorrow, you'll know why. I will be back on Friday, but the hope is to get a pod out tomorrow morning as well. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.